This is our latest installment of the Good News Podcast. So, hey everybody. I guess I'd like to start by introducing my friends here. This is Amos Bracewell, and this is Ed. Amos started his own business called Toon City. It's a really amazing business. If you guys like to check it out, go for it. Ed, as we discussed, kind of likes the title philosophical plumber. Doesn't define him necessarily, but that's just where we find ourselves. He's also a writer. He's got his own book coming along called Praxis Living.
I love the name, the Good News Podcast.
Yeah, you know, it sounds a bit
awesome.
It sounds a bit evangelical, we know, but at the same time, it's just because, like we talked about earlier, it's just we're so tired of turning on the news and just getting the same old bad news over and over and over again. I know it's just because human beings, we filter out so much and we just respond to danger. This is why they have so many negative things on the news, but we're kind of tired of that. We don't think it's necessarily representative of how human beings ought to be living, the direction we ought to be looking at.
Yeah.
So we thought, what better way to establish ourselves as a new channel than by calling ourselves the Good News Network.
No, that's a higher calling.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
We've mentioned this a few times, but like the idea kind of came from a few different things, and Denzel Washington was also credited for in one of his interviews he was saying, he's like, you don't see the other spectrum of the media, which is the good news or like the not compelling, because Graeme, that a phrase which I hadn't heard before, but if it bleeds, it leads. You guys have heard that, right? I had never heard that phrase before. That's true, right? Like it with any case, like if you have some blood and gore or some sex, right? It'll probably sell.
I think it's because there's two sides to all of us, and that feeds the one side, the side that's not regenerating in the likeness of the higher or the highest truth or whatever. I think the part that appeals to our higher self or the potential we have is that kind of stuff. Good. It feeds on, because you have the dichotomy, and both have to feed, and whatever one you nourish will grow, and then you migrate towards. And so most people are living in that camp, and so the more they feed it, the more they need that as sensationalism. When you switch camps and you start going to a higher calling and getting in that whole river thing where eventually they all lead to the ocean.
Yeah.
That the more you go there, the closer you get to the ocean, the more you're going to be. You need and you crave the good stuff, and the other stuff, the sensational stuff, that's the negative stuff. It's like that becomes distasteful. Yeah. I just want the pure.
Yeah, and if we want to look at it this way, where we get the sensationalized, the kind of the negative news aspect, that comes from a very small portion of the population. It's specifically directed at the population, but it's not representative of the whole. Whereas this kind of guerrilla podcasting, this incorporates that. You call it the 99%. What was introduced by Occupy, right? This is being produced by the 99% for the 99%, if you want to look at it that way. And so we can actually see here that it incorporates the values that we actually hold. So we're not talking about the negative things. We're not trying to get people engaged in that. Like we talked about earlier, that's just not the direction we feel we should be moving. Because the question everybody eventually asks themselves is, how do we want to live? What is the most fulfilling lifestyle? And one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you guys is because you guys have done such a great job of realizing that within yourselves, and moving in that direction, Like it's not easy to write a book, and it's not easy to go into the business world. That's a really intimidating aspect for a lot of people, and I guess it'd be nice if we could dispel some of those misconceptions people have about those areas. Like Ed, you've got Praxis Living. You want to talk about that?
I do, yeah. It's interesting that we touched on the difference between negative media, positive media. I feel that I'm working on a project to give to the collective or the people or people that want good information. I'm working on a product like that I'm hoping to make available for free. And it's called, I'm going to be calling it 5 Moments of My Personal Success. Like the really, really grassroots baseline of what changed for me, because I was just like a majority of people that I knew of 8 years ago. I wasn't going anywhere in life. I wasn't doing anything with my life, and I had a season in my life where I was able to spend a lot of time alone, and which caused me to reflect on my misery. And I was like, wow, this is just not the way I want to live. But one of the real keys, one of the 5 most awakening moments was when I realized that I had a choice to shut off negative media and turn on positive media. I actually became awake that there was a difference. I was like, I could get good news. I just had to actually put in a little bit of effort to find it. And one of those sources of positive media that really transformed my life was a program on the internet by a guy named Tom Wood, and it was called 30 Days. I think it was called 30 Days to Mastery or something. And it was just a little 10-minute video that you watched. You're supposed to watch one each day, and over 30 days. But after the 5th day, I was like, I wonder what would happen if I watched all 30 days every day for 30 days. And that's what basically started my high on positive media. And I just started collecting stuff. I started collecting good books like Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins, and I had already been introduced to concepts like The Secret, which was an online video. And then each individual leader out of The Secret, I started tracking them online, and I actually saw that they had been making basically their own careers, that they were contributing to The Secret from their own personal lives. And I started getting pumped up, and it became a new habit. It became a new habit to find positive media, to plug good stuff in. Until you reach like a tipping point where it starts flushing out what we're carrying around, and we become a better human being first and foremost, and then that starts contributing back into the world and making a change. So,
and this goes back to that idea of neuroplasticity that we talked about last time with Vaughn. That really you can master anything, any single trait that you want through training. And that's the amazing thing, that you have just an innumerable number of options that you can train yourself to be proficient in, and it just opens up the world for you.
I think it's interesting that now the age group is kind of opening up too, that like you can, because people have access to information at such a young age now, we can kind of, and the thing is, where we benefit from conversations with people that are older than us, it's from the fact that they have more experience, right? Just in life itself. And there's always been that desire a lot of people have, I'm sure you guys must have felt it, where you feel like, you wish you could skip through all the bullshit and kind of like get to like the actual wisdom at the end, right? And it's like nowadays we have these insane ways of just, instantly transmitting data or transmitting a message or just transmitting something like a podcast or whatever, a vlog, and it's like instantly right there you have the ability to like change somebody's perspective or like tell them your experiences and stuff, right? So it's, before people had to go and read a book to get your perspective, right? I think it's rapidly changing, and we're still getting used to the idea of communication being this quick, right? We're not even utilizing how much like ability we actually have in our modern technology, but we're still like adapting,
It's still new.
It's
still new.
We're trying not to let it go to our heads too, because when you actually begin to fathom just how capable you are, the kind of power you have to shape people's ideas, if anybody's tuned in, I mean, you're changing somebody's brain chemistry, and if you're not conscious of that, and if you're not giving that credence, you can do a lot of damage. And this is one of the reasons why at a very young age I realized just how problematic it was to have the media or a political system that we do. I was just listening to a talk this morning by Michael Ignati. If you remember him, right? He was one of the guys running for Prime Minister of Canada back in 2011, I believe it was. And he's a university professor. He gives lectures on political philosophy, essentially. And he was basically shot down because he wasn't in the country for much of his academic career. And that's obviously not a sticking point if you're going to be a politician here in Canada. But he's somebody who reflected on the idea that from somebody who's studying the philosophy behind so much of this, like if you study Machiavelli and his work in The Prince, you know that the philosophy behind what things you might attribute to being a politician is nothing like what it actually is to be a politician. Like almost none of the qualifications you have academically serve you in the political realm. Like I'm sure you guys have you've been involved in groups at some points where somebody who is not necessarily qualified to lead in terms of intelligence or vision or care for another human being seems to take that role for some reason. Be it charisma or even that there's sometimes a subtle fear among people. They simply don't want to accept their responsibility. But when I recognize that politicians aren't there for any worthy merit, I might say, it really kind of shook me, you know. And so I've always taken it upon myself to be really conscientious about how we present ourselves. I know when we first started this podcast, and I get it when people say this, but they called me robotic, and that's understandable, because in trying to be so conscientious, you trip over yourself. You're really rigid, but I felt like that's necessary. You have to expand your awareness to understand how you're reaching people, you know. And that's really what we apply to our lives, right? Because ultimately our fulfillment is based on how well we relate to other people and how we interact. What do we get back from people?
I think one of the biggest wake-up calls for me was I saw this documentary on how congressmen spend their days, like in the States. And it's just fundraising, right? All day, every day is just trying to get money from different people. So they're going to, they're going to golf courses and they'll shoot like the back nine, whatever. And that's like their morning. And, they're always in the States, because we relate a lot of our media to the States. We're surrounded by it, right? And they'll always be like, write your congressman, speak to your congressman. But realistically, like, these people aren't going to even pay attention because they're just out there trying to get money. And this documentary just literally showed them day to day how they spend their day. And it's just, they're out there just like, living the life, trying to get some like financial contributions from companies.
A ways back, sorry to interrupt, I wrote 3 letters. One to the director of Amnesty International, because I was very involved and interested in expanding human rights. I felt like that was the most worthy area of learning and participating. And I wrote another letter to Noam Chomsky, and I wrote another letter to my local MP.
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank Noam Chomsky, and then I wanted to know from my local MP how it was that I could positively contribute to
what
the
did you want to thank him for?
Just all of his work.
Yeah.
Because he gives of himself so selflessly. He focuses on such a heavy subject for most people, and to put himself out there the way he does, for me, he really is one of my biggest inspirations. So I wrote him a letter thanking him, and I wrote a letter to my local MP asking how I could positively contribute to what was happening with Enbridge. Because I could clearly see that the population is not in favor of a pipeline coming through, and as my local MP, he's representative of the people, right? So, anyways, I sent these 3 letters out. In 2 months, I heard back from Noam Chomsky. I have the email. I've printed it out and framed it in my room. 4 months after that, I got a letter back from the director of Amnesty International telling me how I could further participate. Just giving me a kind of a heads up about how things were going. And I think that was a big thing because, ordinarily you feel like these people are just out of touch. You can't reach them. So that was huge. Guess who I haven't heard back from, though? Yeah, my local MP.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's been a really odd journey. You know what I mean? I'm sure you guys know it never works out the way you think it will. But
I'm learning that's the most fun part.
Yeah, actually, this reminds me of you probably listened to Alan Watts talk, but Alan Watts, this amazing he studied theology. He was a professor for a long time. Studied things like Zen Buddhism. He's got the best laugh, and he's just this great orator. He at one point he said, if you imagine we had the technology at one point to sit in a chair, and we had a keypad where we could experience anything at all, anything that our heart desired. Eventually we get bored, and the only way we'd be able to sustain our interest in this is if we had a button called random, right? It's that element of mystery that really gets us, right? Yeah. And that one of the things that makes me wonder about this Toon City venture is that part of the desire to really involve yourself in that, Amos, at least from my perspective, seemed to be that risk, because business does involve a risk factor. And I'm just curious, was that really something that inspired you to jump into that? I mean, the joy of not knowing and just testing your mettle.
I've always liked a few things I've always enjoyed in life. One is risk. One is the unknown.
The board game Risk? Or
well, in general, yeah.
Because it's pretty enjoyable. I like it. I like taking over the world.
Yeah, me too, man. Yeah. Risk. I'm not risk averse at all. in I don't think in any area of my life I'm risk averse. In relationships, I'm a little guarded now, but still, I love the thrill. So Toon City, which is now has become Yipida, it's yeah. So are you meaning more what are the main drawing cards, or just the fact that alone play a factor in me wanting to?
What was the biggest factor, I guess, is what I'm asking in you starting this business?
Life calling. Honestly, for me, I spent this is a totally different segue now, but I spent 34 years of my life. I've always been into music and singing, and I still do that to this day, and I love it. And to me, it's my. Everyone has a way they express themselves. That's my Zen time. But for me, it's the first thing I've ever done in my life that made sense. So, and it's interesting. Whenever someone finds out for them, it's never because of one. It's always a marriage or is it the word symmetry? But it's the culmination of a few elements which may be X, but it's not about X. It's because what leads to X is the fact that you have A, B, C, and D, which are all part of X, and that's why you love X. And so for me, it's what's it comprised of, and the key elements for me happen to be the independent content creator scene, so music, books, games, movies, apps, and then new business with all risk and adventure in that, and then network marketing, word of mouth marketing. So compensating people for doing the work. So instead of the corporation putting up billboards, which I can't stand, when you're the one who told me to go and see the Bourne Identity, and I happen to love the Bourne series, right? And you're us paying you because you're the reason I went. Yeah, there was a billboard up, but I trust my friend Graeme, and he said, dude, you gotta see this. So that's why I love this, is because it has those elements of things that I really feel.
And that's kind of what's coming out of media nowadays, is that instead of looking to critics like Roger and Ebert, is that? Yeah, I think it is, right? The original critics.
It was Siskel and Ebert, then Roger and Ebert.
It was Siskel, and then Siskel passed away and all. Yeah, but like instead of going to them, people are going, you go to YouTube, there's a bunch of people that just, all day, every day.
They're non-commercial or less commercial.
And they review movies, right?
Yeah,
and
who gives a shit about Rolling Stone anymore? Like,
because you don't feel like you can relate to that voice.
Give it 2 thumbs up.
Right? Yeah, you can't really, and then you can relate to somebody who you like. It seems like that individual is just like you, right? And they're just reviewing.
And that's what stuff like this does.
Yeah,
is it reminds people, it's like, wait a minute, this is just us. This is not.
Yeah, and
gives power to the everyman, right?
I mean, I'm at that stage where a lot of people get to where they're sick of the 9 to 5. They're sick of trading their time for pay, and that's not how we ought to live. And so now we're seeing the society begin to conform to how we actually want to live. And for us, like, this is one of the things, like, network marketing doesn't enjoy a great reception in terms of looking in the public eye. People look at the pyramid scheme.
No, there's stigmas.
There's a lot of stigmas, but at the same time, it is a lot closer to representing about how we want to do things. Because you're actually, like you said, you're compensating people for sharing with one another information, And that's the aspect of, some of the things I don't necessarily like, though. We look at things like ACN. ACN just takes a bunch of corporations, and because you're doing direct advertising, you're eliminating advertising costs, and so you're taking some of the overhead, right? But at the same time, you're still perpetuating things like use of natural gas, fracking, and sale of products that people don't necessarily need, that are not necessarily in their highest good. But at the same time, it's still becoming more and more related to that real person-to-person connection. That's what it's about. Human beings want to live that way. And if we can sustain ourselves by actually making these connections and really building that bond, then that's, I think, a fantastic idea.
Because then you're getting paid as a byproduct of living as humans are meant. Well, I feel humans are meant to live in a more relational and not so much online. Yeah,
and this is one of the words I always come back to in my life, but harmonious. That's something I'll always try to incorporate into the actions I'm having. If it's not harmonious, then all the functions aren't working together in tune with one another like an orchestra, then I think it needs to be restructured. But like this right now, I feel like there's a harmony here. Everybody gets their ideas in, and this forum essentially allows us to really express ourselves and to move into a better direction, because we're not going to do it with a single-minded vision. You know what I mean? Like, this is what we already experienced in history, where you have leaders taking it upon themselves, taking the blame, and directing people into an avenue that they later find out that they don't want. Yeah. And you conveniently have a leader, a scapegoat to take that out on. Now we have to take responsibility for ourselves and decide our own avenues. And this is one of the reasons you decide to write the book.
Yeah, I think it's a big thing. It's funny as we're having this conversation. It's just the thing that comes to mind is no matter where we're at in life, if we actually pay attention to how we behave, we always seem to congregate around and observe people that are actually passionate about what they do. Mm-hmm. We watch sports, we watch musicians, we go to concerts, we watch movies. Mm-hmm. All of those people, very, very few of them actually despise what they do. They all have a deep love and a passion for what they do. And as a common majority of society, you can always find us watching those people. I think we're in a shift right now where the barriers being removed, because a lot of the times we do that is because we don't actually believe we have anything to contribute like they do.
We perceive that we don't.
Yeah, that like you know, what is it? Transition, I guess you'd call it, is actually really starting to get less and less now. People don't think that, like, you know, movie stars or something that's like a.
We perceive there's a ceiling, and that we can't go past it.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm happy to look around now and see that a lot more common people are discovering and awakening to their own passion and saying, you know what, I don't have to just be happy with watching somebody else live their life. I can live my own life too.
Yeah.
Can I say one thing right here?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is not, for those of you who love sports, I grew up following Michael Jordan. Like,
for sure.
Like, he was
the
my
90s Bulls,
cultish leader. Like, I would bow down.
You and Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-il have something in common.
Exactly. So, but when people ask me this last, and a lot of my, I have good friends who follow football, and it's not meant to offend them, but when people asked me recently, Super Bowl, and I put a thing on Facebook, and then I deleted it because I thought, well, I probably should do that if I have. But honestly, how I feel is, why would I watch someone? Why would I spend my time watching someone living their dream? Like, why am I actually going to spend my time doing that? I'd rather go and create my dream. Yeah. Because if I'm living my dream, I'll inspire those who happen to bump into me. But in no way would I ever advocate or want someone tuning in to watch my channel solely because that's their escapism. It's like, go create, like, go find your bliss, pursue that. Yeah, watch others, get inspired by them, but why are you on this planet? Like, you're not on this planet to be a cheerleader and only a cheerleader for everybody else. Like, you have a life, you have a reason to be here. Get busy doing that, because that's what's going to fulfill you. You're not going to be fulfilled by vicariously living through Michael Jordan, as much as I loved him. But it's like, I wanted to be the basketball player then, because I wanted to inspire others. And that's what all of us, I think.
So it's like, tune in, don't tune out.
You know, I just, I was fortunate enough to meet a friend of mine. We grew up with this guy. He's one of my best friends. He's a rock star now, actually. He's touring around Eastern Canada, but I actually got to meet him last night again and talk with him for the first time in ages, because he's such a busy guy. Like, he's a comedian now, he's a painter, he's a rock star. Like, he's actually a guy I look at as somebody who's living something that's true to himself. And one of the things he said, one of the things we're talking about is, one day he was at a party and he was in the bathroom, and he just, you know, that's sometimes the circumstance in which you actually have a real frank conversation with yourself. And at that point he said he saw what it was everybody was reaching for. But the thing is, everybody's just content to look. They're not looking for the goal itself. They're just content in the process of looking. You know? And that's what it is, right? This is the term that gets me when we watch news, and we're back to that, is consumers. This is something that people just take in, and that's just that, right? Nobody really gives it a second thought. But think about that idea. You're just consuming. That's all you are. That's essentially what they see you as. All you do is take something in. And that, I think, is just such a terrible idea, to be that as your identity.
I think the Matrix kind of spooked people a little bit more, because it gave, like, a literal image to that. You know, like, you're just a bunch of rows on rows of, like, heat producing, like.
Well, it stuck it right in your face. And it was like, this is what's going on, and the only two options are, oh, that's not happening, or, oh my God, that's exactly what's happening.
And then you have to literally kill the machine.
We've been quoting a lot of things about revolution these days, about, like, not necessarily revolution, like, you know, viva revolution, be out there in the streets, but revolution, you know, everybody's talking about revolution in their own regard. Russell Brand's doing all these tours talking about the fact that there's a need for a spiritual and religious, or a spiritual non-religious revolution, right? He's like, you know, he's a bit of a hippie guy, but he actually has some pretty cool perspectives, and there's just, you see that same message being echoed out there, that people want a revolution, that the 99% is being represented more and more these days. So I think that, I don't know, you can't be on the cusp of transition for just ages, right? And mankind, like, we're just catching up to how smart we're getting. Like, that's,
if you sit on the edge of transition, whether you're aware of it or not, it'll slowly erode you. It'll eat away at you.
Yeah.
That's why, you know, a lot of times I find myself running a very fine balance, because it's still important not to try to force somebody to change.
yeah.
But when you have something great to influence people and hopefully allow them to do better for themselves, you hit the same kind of block where it's like, you know that what you have to offer may be valuable, but there's a little bit of resistance there.
Yeah.
You still, I find a lot of peace, and this might it might sound a little bit odd, but I find a lot of the peace in the fact that I don't have to worry so much. It's that attachment thing, right? I don't have to worry so much about whether what I have is beneficial to them. It's like, I know through my own experience that you reach a point where you just become frustrated with how you're living if it's not serving you. And you will eventually do something about it, or you won't. And if
you start taking in from venues that you didn't before, maybe, right? So
it's like, there's active and passive participation. If you passively participate in what's not helping you, you still have to pay the consequences.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It may take time, but you know, it's a slight edge thing. It's like, if you do a small thing that doesn't seem like it's doing anything good or bad, you don't observe a change. But over time, you do. So.
No, and this is, you know, it brings me back to the idea. A lot of saints and you know, mystics talk about living their life to the fullest. Essentially, feels like walking on the razor's edge. You know what I mean? And in a way, that makes me sort of think about the entire existence as a pie chart. Imagine that. And yours is just one filament in that pie chart. And the idea is to move as consistently as you can along your filament, because that's the most fulfilling. And it requires that balance, because so much of our lives is spent, you know, blending from this and that. But ultimately, it's just this. This is our single path. That's ours. You know,
you were talking about the convincing somebody against their ideas, kind of, right? And we spoke about Benjamin Franklin. He has a quote that a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And that really is something that is frustrating for people that want to be able to help people, want to be able to, like, you know, bring forward positive change in somebody's lives, and then they feel like, you know, they're kind of just spinning their wheels, right? And it's, I can see that it's really, you know, it gets really frustrating, but then actually realizing that the best way to actually, you know, convince somebody is by doing it yourself, right? That's where, be the change you want to see in somebody else.
Be the change. I love that one.
Graeme, you said something that reminded me, when I was, or first started my journey, I'd say, in terms of asking more questions.
Yeah.
The first part was, it's like, we all crave freedom and like a really no limits kind of thing. But the more I've grown, the more I see that your actual, I'm going to use the word calling, it's actually very specific. It's a very narrow, and not because you're confined, but your own heart's makeup and desires are for a very, it may be 2 or 3 or 5 different things, but they're down a very narrow path, and not as in, I'm not even talking about right and wrong, moral, immoral, but it's a very specific. And so the more I grew, the more, at the beginning it was like, oh, I could do anything, I can be anything, I can, which is true, but the more you grow, the more I've grown, the more I've come in tune with the fact that, wow, I'm actually here for, you know, these specific things. I'm not, I know I could explore, but it would be not only incongruent with my heart, but it's like we've been gifted with things that as we wake up and realize what those things are,
Yeah.
that's where the good stuff will be, when we
Yeah.
follow those.
Yeah.
Well, you mean when you look at the infinity around you, and there's no limit to what's around us, but then you look at yourself, and you look at your history, and just the unfathomable chances of you being born, your ancestors and your ancestors' ancestors being born. That is such a very fine, narrow filament, and your path is essentially congruent with that from what you've come from.
Because that's the seed, that's the soil. You'll bear a lot of that likeness in
Yeah.
and you're wired and you're
Yeah.
been grown and groomed for something we don't even know that we have a lot of times.
Yeah.
We wake up at 40 or 60 or whatever, 20, and we go, oh my God, it makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
Even the things we've been wounded in, which is interesting because we despise the blows we received and we resent them, but it's in those, and it's not just because to choose to look at the good, but there actually is like a beauty in the negative stuff.
yeah.
Because it's almost like, it's weird to say it's a blessing, but it
Yeah.
almost could be a blessing.
It is. You know, this is something that always gets me, but I think back to the story of Gautama Buddha, right? Here's somebody who lived his entire life without experiencing hardship until he was, 21 or so? Like, his father was essentially, he had 2 palaces for him, and he would move him between the palaces so that he never saw winter. He never saw decay in nature. He had servants remove any dead leaves from the property, so he never experienced death or sickness. Everybody was informed that he would be coming to the town before he actually ventured through an area, so that all the sick, all the dying, everybody was removed. So all he saw was youthful beauty. And it wasn't until he came of age that he actually met a dying man, that he saw a sick person, that he realized that for all of the beauty that he experienced in his life, it was going to come to an end. It was going to be taken away from him. So it was I like to think of it as almost a petty desire to be beyond all that. You know, this desire that I don't want this to end. I don't want to get that. From that petty desire was born enlightenment, you know. And in a lot of our lives, you think of our childhoods, right? We might have dealt with bullies. We might have dealt with, being made fun of. You know, there's always an abuse or a sort of trauma that seeded it. But
Yeah.
from our petty response to that, we've grown into something so much more. But still, at our very basis, like a grain of sand being used to balance, this thing we call life. That was the seed. These tiny instances where we just realized that's not what we wanted. That's what we're bouncing against our whole lives.
And you always have that desire to just want to fast forward to the life lesson, right? Like fast forward through all the suffering and all the obstacles that come along the way, but you wish that you could just get that life lesson at the end that makes you feel stupid for all the mistakes you made along the way, right? But
I experienced that with the Toon City journey. We've been going almost 3.5, getting close to 3.5 years. When we started it, I wanted it just, obviously you want the baby to be born because that's the joy part. We've been through tremendously difficult things in the last 2 years, and now it's finally.
Yeah.
But I didn't know the cost. I didn't know all the shit we had to go through. I also didn't know how much going through that stuff would shape and change me and those around me who are still part of it. And I didn't know the people that would come into my life. I didn't know how grateful I feel now for the fact that I did go through that stuff because of how it shaped the dream, the vision, myself and those other people. So it's not only I wasn't aware of the blessings of things being prolonged and not prolonged. They were going to be that way. But in my own mind, I go, I begrudge the fact that it's taking longer. But the gifts along the way that were along the path, they really are gifts. And I'm like, japers, if I could go back, would I shorten the journey? If I at the cost of losing those gifts? No, because those gifts are really, really valuable gifts now.
Yeah. I think take from a similar thing that I sometimes, not looking at necessarily where you're walking, kind of, it's like you may not be as cautious or as, organized in your ways, but sometimes those little bumps kind of add to the journey, right? Mm-hmm. And so I know what you mean. And when you were saying earlier that when you got into Toon City and all this industry, it was kind of like a gamble in itself. And it's like, I'm along the same thing that, gambling with my life is usually, I'm a bit of a thrill seeker, right? And like I could see myself doing the whole windsuit thing and everything, right? But
You guys seen
Squirrel
those,
suit?
man? The squirrel suits.
I watch
really,
videos,
I
man.
really want to.
Crazy.
I really want to. That's on my
Flirting
bucket
with
list.
death.
That's like when I'm like 70 and like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
By
if
then,
I
man, you
spot-
can just use your skin. You won't need a squirrel suit.
exactly.
Shit.
Oh man.
Yeah, but
I'm
Listen.
picking up. Oh, sorry.
sorry, I just wanted to let you guys know we got about 10 minutes before you
Cool.
said you had to wrap it
Yeah.
up.
Okay.
But sorry, what were you saying?
I've been listening, and there's a very interesting thing about farming that's coming into our conversation, and it's the fact that all the plants they grow out of fertilizer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they grow out of the thing that we despise the most, but that's
Yeah.
what provides the most nutrition
Yeah.
and the most nutrients to grow.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I know very, very basic farming. You use too much fertilizer, you just kill the plant.
Yeah.
You got to have the right mixture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it comes down to, I think there's a subtle difference between seeking out the crap in life and just making peace with the crap. There's enough that's going to be thrown at you all by itself.
Yeah.
You don't need to add to that aggravation and basically rule yourself out by additionally seeking more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A lot
So
of
you shouldn't
times,
make it more difficult for yourself.
a lot of times that's what people are subconsciously doing, paying attention
Yeah.
to news,
Yeah.
the wrong news, and
Yeah.
getting involved with the wrong things.
Yeah.
It's like the hard times do shape character.
Yeah.
But too many of them just steal your hope.
Yeah,
that's-
and this
that's
is
the
why
key.
I find it
That's
really,
really good.
it's really important to recognize it. For me, I like to use the term catalyst. It's a little easier for me to see it like stereo instructions or chemistry, but these events are a catalyst for you to develop the kind of person you want to be. And you can consciously decide your own catalyst. You're right, there's going to be so much of it thrown at you. But being able to be consciously aware that these are catalysts for you are what allow you to take it in stride. Some people I've read were even able to reach you might call it a state of enlightenment, staying in Auschwitz. People that lived in concentration camps, they found themselves in those situations through that kind of extreme trauma. It's possible anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
We just have to recognize what it can do for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's wow. This went from like kind of just loose conversation to really deep. All of a sudden,
Yeah. That's the beauty of it, though, man. I mean, we never know where we're gonna end up in these things,
yeah.
and nor should we. If we did, they'd never get to where they are.
And we've been like one of the reasons why we came out and started recording these conversations is because you know how sometimes you'll just be sitting around with the guys and you'll just be talking random shit and somebody will bring up one point.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, I wish we had recorded that.
Exactly, and
You
that's
said that a number of times too.
yeah, that's the main reason why I
Yeah.
started the podcast. Right now, it's a little bit difficult getting used to. It's like almost another person that nobody knows, which is the mic in the room,
mhm.
right? It kind of feels like that. Like you're kind of like, oh, okay, you kind of have to adjust the way that you speak, the way that your conversation kind of leads.
Yeah.
But after a while, once we get flowing and stuff, I'm really looking forward to some of the people that we can have conversations with. Like this
you
is
guys.
this is wicked, right? Like
Yeah.
this is what we wanted. Like we're kind of running out of stuff to talk to each other about because we already live with each other, right?
Yeah,
and we're
okay.
just like day to day, we're just like, damn, like what else?
Yeah, but you know what? Like, sorry, just one thing that this made me think of. Like the way they discovered the Higgs boson, and one of the reasons why we have a podcast to me is kind of like we're looking for the best conversation, just the ultimate, right? The ultimate point, the ultimate most enlightening thing. The same thing with the Higgs boson. That particle that really hammered home the some of the theories in physics. That was the unifying particle, right? And the way they observed that was they just kept firing protons and just looking at reaction. Like it just happened over and over and over and over again, and to the
Until
point
the
where they didn't
ideal
even realize
situations,
where they could see it. But this is how it's going to happen. We're just going to keep ramming the proton into the beam and just seeing if we can. I don't know if that's right, but we're going to see if it actually comes together. And you know what? Every one of them really is in its own
And
way.
you never know when it will.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
I've been going after these certain things in singing because I really love singing. Everyone has their thing, and that's for me. And
I love singing in the shower.
the reverb is great.
I love it.
Your
Man.
voice sounds so full.
No, legitimately,
Yeah.
it really is. Damn.
Well, maybe we should record the next one there. We can sing. I don't know.
The acoustics for the podcast might be good in the shower too. That's
Yeah.
shower podcast.
Awkward moments in the. You can name it something.
Don't
like that.
drop the soap.
No, no.
Right? That's
Everyone has to wear a
That's-
thong.
yeah.
That's the rule.
whoa.
It's got to match your cup.
Yeah.
Those are
Your,
some
your
br-
drinking cup, not
Yeah.
your jug cup.
Oh yeah. But yeah, it's I don't know. Along the road, we just we want to meet people and just keep talking, right? And that's the main thing, is just keep facilitating conversation, keep it moving, keep it going, and somewhere along the way, like you said, just
something sticks.
The ideal conditions will be met, so, and there you go.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, guys, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for agreeing to be on here.
Oh, loved it.
Yeah, well, we should do this again.
Yeah, well, we would do it again.
For sure.
Awesome.
We got lots of time sometimes.
For sure.
Yeah, no, we that cafe that we actually brought these chais from, that the owner, he's gonna let us use their setup. They have like a complete studio setup with broadcast cameras and
boom mics,
boom mics, everything.
Right there.
This guy, I gotta be honest, like, this is just from me personally, but he's just an amazing guy at what he does. He's always running a charity drive. He's playing sports 3D. He does soccer.
He's
3
a courier job too.
Yeah,
and he runs the cafe.
Since
I
never met him.
old owner.
We gotta introduce
Yeah,
him.
the old owners.
Yeah,
I
sick
don't
chai,
know.
man. Like, I can't pump this guy enough.
He's like 30 something, and he still plays like full I think he's playing men's soccer.
He's center mid, which is the most active.
Jazz Anand. And
I played center mid for part of a season. It is the most exhausting position.
Isn't it?
Yeah,
And this guy does it 3 days a
I
week.
played
exhausting.
center. It's the most running, right? And I played sweeper, and it's like I thought that was a lot of running because you're working the D, right?
Yeah.
But then at the end of the day, you're still like, push up, push back, right?
Yeah.
You get to walk. But center mid is just you're running up and down, and that's crazy endurance. So best way to get cardio is just jump into center mid. But
Yeah.
even if you don't actually touch the ball, you look like you're doing something by just running back and
Bro,
forth.
you've been doing conference calls.
Serious.
Serious.
Just running back and forth. But
soccer was my. I loved I loved basketball. I didn't have a good. Well, I had an okay vertical jump, so I wasn't, and I'm not very.
Well,
tall.
you're white though. White men can't
and I'm
jump.
white.
Yeah,
the odd guy can, but I think it's because the mom dated a black guy and came out white. But anyway, but soccer is like it's a chess game, and as I grew older, I'm really thankful that I played because it's like you watch it. It's they got the biggest pussies in the many sport though.
Yeah,
they're rolling down the
Every
ground.
sport does though, man. Like NBA too, you see like off the elbows they'll just
I don't know,
fall.
man.
Yeah,
Rugby doesn't have these guys. Soccer is just
Every guy that goes down.
Italy, right?
Every guy.
Italy's like the worst.
It's like, do they not think that there's slow motion cameras? Like, we get to watch it and replay.
Are you interested in the World Cup coming up? No.
Well, I don't. Yeah, I watch a little bit of it, but I just.
Yeah, no, you're right though, man.
It's coming up though,
I cringe
right?
every time I see a guy go
Jim
down because I know it's gonna be.
Yeah,
You
amazing.
guys see his talk show
Yeah.
on soccer?
Yeah,
He rips it. Yeah.
Rips soccer apart because of that. Not because they're not a great athlete, but because of that.
Yeah. Some of these, like, I gotta, like, Sapio showed me just the most insane kick in the world. Like, I don't know if you guys seen this, but what was his name again?
Have you heard of Roberto Carlos? Like the Brazilian team?
Yeah.
Because everybody knows, like, okay, Ronaldinho, they know, right?
Yes,
they know,
but he's also,
and they know the old Ronaldo, the first Ronaldo. Everybody knows Cristiano Ronaldo, right? Because he's all nice, like, model guy and everything, right? But the actual first Ronaldo, the bald Ronaldo, everybody knew. But Roberto Carlos was the individual that nobody really like talked about that much unless you were like kind of a football fan. And the first time I ever saw his kick was he has two kicks that are they're deemed impossible. So one of them is he's outside the 18-yard box. He has a free kick, and there's a wall set up 10 yards ahead of him. So goalie's watching him, and here's the wall and the net's in front of him. He shoots out, and the ball is going at a straight angle, straight out towards like the sideline, and then it curves in and kisses the inside of the post and goes in the net. That was one. Yeah. That was one. The second one, Sportsnet actually analyzed, because they're like, scientifically this is not possible, and they're like, you cannot reenact it. We cannot ever possibly consider it being like redone. How he did it was he was running. Here's the net here, and he's running to the side, and there's the other side of the field is there. So he's running. The net's here. He's running full pace, and he kicks with his outside leg, so his left leg kicks the ball as it's bouncing.
It's right on the line when he kicks it.
And bouncing, right? Okay. So it's on the line about this high. Kicks it, crosses body, goes like this, and it goes in the net.
Like it sweeps around like
It
that?
swept
So
out.
okay.
It swept out and curved because the
How
goalie.
recent was this?
This was like 10 years ago, like a while back,
so
right?
yeah.
But it was deemed the most impossible kick. Never can be redone because they don't even understand how it's done now. They don't like the science behind it. The amount of
Well,
angle,
there's so many factors.
so many
Yeah.
factors, and like the goalie would have just had to like put his hand out, and the fact that he tricked the goalie with his shot too, it's I don't know. Somehow it's the shamans in South America have been doing something.
Well,
to
have you seen Ed's wind punch that splashes wax? Because that is.
What was that? Like
It's
a, like a
wind
1-inch punch? Is it like a 1-inch punch?
He was trying to do the touchless punch to blow candles.
Yeah.
Oh,
And the girl
yeah,
he's
yeah,
seeing was
cappuccino.
here watching on the other side, and he somehow missed, and he hit the candle, and hot wax sprayed all over her chest, her arms, her hair. She got like a money shot of hot wax.
oh shit!
And the thing was, she liked it. She's like, she liked it.
What? She's like, I'm free next Wednesday. If you wanted the candle thing again.
Call it the money shot punch. So.
That's hilarious.
Right on. Well, it's 2:15 or
Cool.
12:15 now. So
Good.
again, guys, thanks so much for this. This is awesome.
You
Yeah.
should name that.
The actual,
It looks like a head, so you need to name it. Give it a name.
the actual mic. Mike? That's not very original. I'm just kidding.
You know how whatever. You call it blue.
No, I could see it. It's got like a little bit of like.
There's personality on that. You need to name that.
There is.
Not Wilson. That's like Castaway. But it's like that. It's like that.
Graeme walks in like I'm just like coddling this thing like one night. I'm like, it's my
Is that a
friend.
bloody handprint?
It's my real friend. But yeah, we'll go out on that one. But yeah, thanks a lot, guys. We'll do this again soon.